Becky Robison is the mind behind My Parents Are Dead, What Now, which is an incredible web resource for those navigating parental loss, but it's also a soon to be released book coming out in January 2026. Becky, thank you so much for being on the podcast today.
Thank you for having me. I am very excited to talk to you.
Awesome. You were just on the speaker at the Lifting the Lid Festival, weren't you?
It's this weekend, so
Oh,
it's
it's
coming up.
coming.
So I will be talking at the Lifting the Lid Festival in a few days.
That's awesome. Very exciting. Okay, well, so let's just dive right in. You lost your parents within a matter of a few years of one another. Tell us about that and, how it kind of all unfolded.
Yeah, so my mom died of liver disease in 2020. That was very stressful, A, because I mean, it's a stressful situation in general, but B, the pandemic was going on.
Yeah.
So we weren't sure if we were going to be able to, if she was going to be able to be at home when she died.
Right.
Fortunately, she was at home with us. So I mean, that went as well as it could have gone given the circumstances, but
Yeah.
obviously it was very difficult. We couldn't hold a memorial for her right away because people couldn't gather. So we had to wait a year. And then in 2023, right after I moved to Louisville, Kentucky in 2022, my dad was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer.
Oh, God.
So my sister and I would drive back up to Wisconsin where he was every couple of weeks to help care for him because I didn't want my sister to have to do it herself.
Right.
He died in early 2023, in March of that year. So after that, I ended up as the executor of the estate and successor trustee. Um, Eldest daughter, so that's not necessarily surprising.
Congratulations.
Yeah, that's our job, right?
Yeah.
So I knew that was going to happen. Like he had briefly mentioned that I would be kind of in charge, but we hadn't really talked about any of it. We had not talked. I knew that my parents wanted to be cremated, and that's kind of it. Like I didn't know anything about what they would have wanted in terms of a funeral.
Right.
I didn't know exactly what the stipulations of a will or a trust were, or even really how that worked. I just knew that I was in charge. And so I managed to find the necessary paperwork, but that doesn't really explain anything. Like you
Right.
have the paperwork, but it's like, okay, so what do I do
Now
with
what?
this? Where do I
Right.
even bring this?
Right.
Yeah. So I describe my support group as aggressive. Like I have aggressive amounts of support in my life. So
Yeah.
I was asking my aunts and uncles. I was asking my friends' parents. One of my best friends, their dad worked in insurance for over 30 years. So I was asking them a lot of questions, and they were absolutely trying to help me. But either they couldn't remember the details of when their own parents had died, or they had just hired a lawyer who did everything and they didn't know the
Yeah.
specifics.
Yeah.
And I was also having trouble finding stuff online. I could find bits and pieces here and there, but it wasn't very clear. So
Right.
I created deadparentswhatnow.com pretty quickly after my dad died. The idea behind it being it would be sort of a living document. So
Right.
as I learned how to do these things, I could put it up there and people could sort of follow the progress, and then it would all be in one place for people. And then it sort of snowballed from there and took over my life. Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so since your mom passed first, I mean, I guess, is it, is there no like, I'm trying, there's some weird noise. Sorry. If your mom passed first, then you don't have like all of that stuff when the final parent passes, do you? I mean, like, because you've still got your dad was
No.
still alive, so there was no like figuring out the will and all of that stuff, right? Is that right?
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
So I didn't have to do, for the most part, didn't necessarily have to do that stuff for my mom. Of course, when she died, I did help. I wrote her obituary. I helped
Yeah.
with the funeral planning and stuff. But in terms of the legal aspects, my dad was handling that, the legal and
Okay.
financial aspects, because he would have technically been like her heir, right?
Right.
But, um, but there are a few things that just kind of get lost in the shuffle, I guess, when you're doing
Yeah.
estate planning. My parents were, all things considered, pretty prepared, and
Yeah.
it was still very difficult to untangle everything. And quite frankly, there are still a few little things that I am untangling at this moment, still, even years later.
Really?
But for example, yeah, they had certain things that they owned together. So I still had to go get death certificates for my mom. We didn't have any more, but after my dad died, I had to like go back to the funeral home and ask them if they could get more death certificates. You can either do that at the funeral home or at the county clerk's office, whichever, you can kind of go through
Yeah.
either. But I had to get more death certificates for my mom to like help clear some things up. there is, for example, one thing I'm still clearing up is what I call the ghost car. So in 2019, my mom bought a car for my sister,
Okay.
but she never titled it over into my sister's name.
Ah,
And so she died. So my dad should have inherited the car, right? It would have been his car,
yeah.
but he never titled it into his name or my sister's name. And then he
Okay.
died. So my sister was driving around this car that was titled into the name of like two dead parents ago.
Oh God.
And I went to, now neither my sister nor I live in Illinois, and my mom bought this car in Illinois because that's where she
Okay.
was living at the time. So
Okay.
I took it to the Illinois DMV. I had all the necessary paperwork to be like, hey, they're both dead. We are, like, here's how this should go.
Yeah.
And they were like, well, we agree with you, but because neither you nor your sister live in Illinois, we can't title it onto either of your names, so we have to title it into the estate of Nancy Robison, even though her estate had been closed for years. That's my dog playing with the door. Sorry about that.
No, no worries.
So her estate had been closed for years. So then I contacted an estate attorney in Illinois to say, hey, can we do like a small estate thing with just this car that's not worth that much, so that we can get it into my name or my sister's name so we can sell it? Because that's the other thing. We had to use money from the trust to buy my sister a new car that was titled in her name that she could actually drive. And then we were going to sell this ghost car and repay the trust.
Right.
But anyway, the Illinois state attorney says that because my dad died after my mom, or yes, because my dad died after my mom and the car technically would have been his, it has to go through like his estate. So we would have to reopen
Oh
his
my
estate.
God.
So I contacted a lawyer in Florida and they were like, no, because this is in Illinois, Illinois has to handle it. So finally I contacted my county clerk here in Jefferson County, Kentucky, because the Secretary of State here doesn't handle car stuff. It's the county clerks in Kentucky.
Okay.
But I contacted them and I was like, listen, unless you make an exception and title it over to me, this car is just going to rot. Like no one can drive it.
Yeah.
So I'm hopefully getting through to them. Like I've had some progress on that front that they might make an exception and just like title this car into my name so I can sell it. But yeah, so like technically I didn't have to handle any of my mom's estate stuff, except that I accidentally did, just because there were these few,
Oh
just
my
because they
God.
were, just because they didn't want to go to
Yeah.
the DMV when they were alive, which who can blame them? Nobody
No.
wants to go to the DMV. Yeah.
Nobody.
Yeah.
Oh my God. But that's that becomes a full-time job. I mean, that's just like,
Yes.
that's wow.
If it were up to me, I would say we don't need like bereavement leave. If you're an executor, you need like a bereavement year. You need like a year off with pay so that you can do this. Because I mean, that's why I'm still figuring some of this out. It takes it's extremely time consuming to make these calls, and you're sitting on the phone with people, or you have to like physically go to the DMV multiple times, or you have to contact people in multiple states. It's a ton of work. Even if, like I said, the paperwork was largely together. My dad had a trust. Theoretically, that means we should have been able to skip probate court entirely.
Right.
But there were a few items he forgot to put in the trust, and I had a pour over will. So I could go to the court and say these things should have been in the trust, but I still had to get a lawyer in Florida to go to the court to get them so that I could get the letters and convince these companies to let me put them in the trust. So it's
I feel like you're a living example of all of the worst case scenarios of what an estate attorney tells you. This is why you need to do this, so that your people who outlive you don't have to do it. Like you had to do it all. Yeah.
Yes. This is why you need to do that stuff. And like, to be fair, my parents did.
Right.
They thought they were doing the right thing.
Right.
They thought, and they were. It's just that it's really hard to stay on top of all of that stuff.
Right.
And I mean, who is really the person? Like, you should really like every year go through that paperwork and make sure everything is still up to date and where it needs to be.
Yeah.
But that's a very difficult thing to do. Not a lot of people do that.
No.
Yeah.
What was probably the single most challenging to do on your list? Like, was it, closing bank accounts or getting documents or transferring car titles maybe?
The car title has been a journey. The other thing I would say that has been the hardest is stocks. I think people, my parents had some mutual funds. Those were easier because they could like have beneficiaries, or that they were in the trust name, so they were already in the trust.
Yeah.
But there was a few items of like few individual stocks that they, for whatever reason, did not have in the trust.
Right.
And those companies like they're so hard to get in touch with. They need lots of paperwork to transfer the stock into a different name. And they
Right.
also need something called a medallion signature guarantee, which is like a notary stamp, except it's basically the financial system saying, oh, we're too cool for notary stamps. Like, we don't trust a regular notary. So we're going to make you go somewhere else to get this special fancy stamp, which it's the same thing. You have to sign in front of the person who's giving you the stamp, but it's only at certain banks. And if you're a customer of that bank, then, they probably won't charge you to get the medallion signature guarantee. But if you aren't a customer, they might charge you money to get it. And it's not every person at the bank, like exactly like how not every person at the bank is a notary, not every person is a
Right.
medallion signature person. And
Right.
they're not always there every day. So you're like calling to different banks to be like,
Oh
who is
my
available
God.
to give me a medallion signature guarantee? And even when you do it, in my experience, like insurance companies for life insurance and stuff, fairly easy to work with. There are certain companies who do this, even I will say like the Florida DMV, pretty easy to work with. These stock companies are the worst. Like, just
Really?
don't buy stock, don't do the stock market. I'm kidding. I can't give financial advice, but like it's yeah,
Okay.
they're very difficult to work with.
So in the days following, I guess primarily your dad's death. I mean, how does having to do all of this work, like how does that, like I read on somewhere on your website about how, writing the obituary was your first opportunity to really grieve. And like,
Mm-hmm.
so how does like suddenly now having to do all of this work, like how does that infringe on or impact your ability to grieve?
It was very stressful and it made me very angry, because there was no clear instructions for how to do anything.
Yeah.
And it was stressful because I didn't know how soon I had to do any of this. Like, I knew from my mom's death that I needed death certificates, and I knew like from, because obviously the first point of contact was like the crematorium, where we were, or
Right.
the funeral home where we were working with for my dad. So
Right.
I knew that they would get the death certificates for us, but, or that they would at least get 5. That was part of the package. And I knew we'd probably have to get more, but it was very hard because I wanted to grieve, but I was also in the back of my mind being like, am I going to get in legal trouble? Like, is there like a
Yeah.
point of time where I have to have this will to the court? Is the court where I bring it? How soon do I have to contact a
Right.
lawyer? And so all of that
What are the
stuff.
answers to that? Like, is there a timeline or a deadline?
Well, no, I mean, obviously you should do it as soon. You can't do anything until you get the death certificate. So that can take anywhere from like a week to several weeks.
Okay.
So don't really worry. I would say don't really worry about any of that stuff until the death certificate comes.
Right.
And then I would say, like, as soon as the death certificates come, the first place you probably want to go are like the court and the bank, to like
Yeah.
get their stuff.
Okay.
But it's not like anyone I mean, I'm sure there are examples, but in my research, I have not found anything where a court's going to be like, you didn't get to us with the will right away.
Yeah.
We're going to throw you in prison. Like, I don't think there's a penalty where they can throw you in prison. And of
Yeah.
course, it varies from state to state. That's the other thing that's difficult about this, and was difficult when I was writing the book, especially, is that every state has slightly different laws. But yeah, I think you're probably safe. Just don't worry about any of that until you get the
Yeah.
death certificates. You
Yeah.
can't do anything in terms of the money or in terms of legal stuff until those are there.
Okay. And so at what point did you realize, you know what, I need to take all of this experience and all of these things I'm learning and put it out to the masses and share this information and create the website?
It was really soon. Like, my dad died in the end of March 2023, and I think I had the bones of the website up by like May, because
Oh, wow.
it
That's
was
fast.
really fast, just because I don't know, I'm a writer. I mean, I've
Yeah.
always been, at the time I was working in corporate communications. I have like a degree in creative writing. I that's how I process things. So I'm constantly taking tons of notes when I'm in meetings, all of that stuff.
Hmm.
So I figured I was in a good position to at least, put information out there.
Yeah.
I figured it would be a living document. Things could change as I go. It doesn't have to stay the same all the time. And I also didn't think it would turn into my job at the time. So I was like, oh, I'll basically put this out there as like a way to help people. And it'll be just this nice thing I did where
Yeah.
I can put it out there. And I did not expect it to go get as much attention as it did. But now I'm glad it did, because I'm doing a lot more work in this area, and I find it a lot more fulfilling than when I was working a corporate communications
Yeah.
job.
So
So,
you left your job. So then when you say this became your job, like what do you do? What do you do with this information?
oh, well, it was about a year before I actually quit my job after that. Like,
Yeah.
I was still working and doing the site for a long time. And then I got the book deal pretty soon after. Once the site went up and I started adding things to it, I had started getting emails from editors, and I had had an agent for when I was trying to sell fiction. So I contacted her and said, Sally, how do I write a book proposal? Because for nonfiction books, you have to have a book proposal rather than a draft. It's very strange.
Okay.
But yeah, so the book deal came later that year, and now it's finally coming out because publishing is very slow. But
Yeah.
yeah, so I mean, I'm hoping, especially once the book comes out, I'd love to do more public speaking. I have talks that I've made, and I do give some of those talks in places. I've also been doing some events. I've done like a write your own obituary event. And yeah, I've sort of been throwing spaghetti at the wall, if I can be perfectly honest with you, just
Yeah.
trying to see what sticks.
Yeah.
But I have some ideas, perhaps because I know I was when I wrote the book and when I was researching, I became certified as a death doula. I know
Okay.
there's a lot of discourse about certification as this, but I wanted to learn more about that. So I took death doula training, and I also audited an estate law course, which was interesting. I convinced a local law professor to be like, can I just jump into your classes online and hang out and read the textbook and learn about this? So
And
yeah,
he said,
so that
yes.
was great.
That's amazing.
Yeah. Maybe you should just, this is a tip for everybody. If you're interested in the subject, just see if your local professors will let you hang out. Maybe you get to learn about it for free.
That's amazing.
Yeah, so that was really wonderful. But anyway, I'm just trying to kind of figure it out. I know that I like staying in the education space. This is something that I think I am better at. And also logistically, it would be hard to do 11th hour doula work, that sort of thing, because I live alone and I have a dog. So I can't leave my dog alone for several hours while I go sit by someone's bedside, which is not to say that I don't appreciate or enjoy that part of the work. I do volunteer with hospice patients every week at a local Omega home. But I am hoping in the future, to do more public speaking, since I really feel drawn to that, and also to do more, perhaps, post-death coaching. This is how, I think a lot of doulas focus on the dying part, the legacy part, which makes sense.
Right.
But for me, what got me into this was that as a frustrated orphan, I got really confused and stressed out, and I think it would be great if there were more help in that area, because lawyers are going to speak to you in legalese, even if they're really well-intentioned. And the funeral home is there for a certain part, and hospices often offer grief services, but you need someone to sort of help walk you through step by step.
Like
and
triage everything.
Yeah. And like, even if it were just meeting with people and keeping people on track, that's something I'm thinking about doing.
Yeah.
Yeah, but hopefully more public speaking. And I think that'll be a little bit easier once the book comes out, because then I'll say, hey, I have a book. You should, Yeah. And obviously, hopefully Oprah will find the book and she'll be like, wow, this is the best book. And then it will sell millions of copies and it'll be great. Yeah.
I will keep my fingers crossed on that.
Thank you.
In terms of the book, is there like additional content or different angles you took in the book? Like, how does it differentiate from the website?
Yeah, so it's kind of largely an expanded version of the website, where the information I have on there, I just dive a lot deeper. I got to interview a bunch of different experts. So each chapter has I asked a blank, so you don't have to section. So there's, I asked a funeral director, so you don't have to. I asked an estate attorney, so you don't have to. I asked a hospice worker, so you don't have to. All of these things. And I interviewed I tried to stay kind of, what does an expert mean, right? Is it someone who has the most social media followers? Is it someone who has books? Is it someone who's working on the ground? I tried to stick with people who were generally working on the ground. Also, they were more likely to talk to me. Probably the hardest to get to talk to me was an estate attorney, because I think that they're afraid of legal consequences if they're like giving advice, But I did manage to talk to people. I talked to an accountant. So I talked to people in a lot of different areas, and they were super helpful, and I got to do interviews with them, which I love doing. And then there's also lists of things you might be able to delegate. There's a whole chapter on what happens if you kind of die in debt, if you are, if there's not a lot of money to handle these things, because I think that's a problem that doesn't get talked about a lot. I was very fortunate. My family had a lot of that stuff figured out. most people don't. So, how
Yeah.
to handle the cost of these things if you don't have a lot of resources, or if you inherit a house that you can't afford, or all of these things.
Right.
So, I included a whole chapter on that. There is a chapter about feelings, which is not my milieu, mostly because there are so many good grief resources out there already that I
Yeah.
didn't really feel like I needed to tackle that area. But I also think it's a very difficult subject to talk about without talking about grief in some
Yeah.
ways. So
Yeah.
I did do a chapter about feelings, and I got to talk to Rebecca Feinglass of Grieve Leave. So that was great. She was perfect for the book. So I
Yeah.
was very grateful to her. And yeah, I'm just trying to educate people. It's basically like my site, same sense of humor, same information, but like expanded and in way more detail.
Yeah.
And also with experts in case you're like, who's that? Who's that lady?
Yeah. So
Yeah.
did writing the book, did it kind of make you kind of revisit or have to reprocess aspects of your parents' death in different ways or in new ways? Like,
Yeah, I mean, I did have to kind of work through my feelings about certain things. I certainly, obviously, I had good relationships with both my parents for the most part,
yeah,
and certain aspects made me kind of wish they had talked to me more about certain things. I'm like, well,
yeah,
why? My mom was a therapist, for example, so I'm
yeah,
like, why? Theoretically, you should be able to make space for talking about emotions. So why didn't you talk to me more about this stuff beforehand? Like,
yeah,
why didn't you sit me down and decide to be honest with me about what you wanted? I mean, to be fair, it's not entirely her fault. She was also raised Catholic in the 60s,
yeah,
so
yeah,
yeah. But it's frustrating. It makes you think about that stuff, how much easier things could have been
yeah,
if they had just, been able to have those discussions. And I'm not necessarily surprised that my dad wasn't able to have those discussions, but
yeah,
with my mom, it would have been nice if she had.
yeah,
And it made me, it also made me think, like, if they had been a little bit more accepting of death, their own deaths would have been a little bit easier. They
yeah,
both died in hospice care, which I think, as far as things go, was the best possible death they could have gotten under the circumstances. But
yeah,
with my dad, especially, he really didn't want to die. And even though he knew his prognosis was not good, he was, I think, kind of convinced he could beat his cancer out of spite. And so it was very, very difficult when he realized he had gone into the hospital because he had to get some blood transfusions after the chemo. It can make your like white blood cell count go
yeah.
down and all of this.
Mhm.
And I had to be like, oh, you're not leaving the hospital. Like the doctors had talked
Oh,
to us. And oh, that was probably the worst day of my life, is having to tell my dad, you are not leaving the hospital. Like, we're
that's
down to the
brutal.
end of the line. Yeah.
That's
And
brutal.
you could see how shocked he was, even though he was feeling so bad, even though he knew he was sick, even, he was just like, this kind of shock and horror went across his
Oh
face when he kind
God.
of realized. And it went downhill pretty quickly from there. It was, he kind of waited until the last minute. But that's the
Yeah,
thing. I wish if he had been able to accept that earlier. Part of the nice, especially because I volunteer with hospice patients now, and I
yeah,
see, how it can be. It's, if people kind of accept it a little earlier, it's really nice when I get to work with hospice patients and I'm like, yeah, you can have 7 bowls of ice cream.
yeah, yeah,
It's, isn't that great? Like, you can eat exactly what you want, and like, yeah, you can watch westerns all day. Like,
yeah,
that's what I'm here to help you with,
yeah.
like, whatever you want, we're going to figure out a way to get it to you. And so it would have been a little bit, I think, nicer if they had both, but especially my dad, been able to kind of accept that earlier.
Well, they had to have been young. How old were they?
They were in their 60s. So my mom, when she died, I think was 64, 65, and then my dad was 69.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, and you have one sister?
Yes, I have one younger sister.
Do you think that just in terms of settling the estate and I mean I guess it's kind of a moot point if you have one executor, but like does having
Yeah.
siblings complicate things, or was it in your case, was it, a comfort to have? I mean, you hear of some families where you've got multiple siblings and there's only one executor and it's like it turns into just a total shit show because they're like fighting over, well, that's not what, you know what I mean? It's just differences
Yeah.
of opinions and things like that.
I'm very fortunate that my family is not particularly litigious at all. So
Yeah,
my sister and I were very on the same page
that's
about, they
amazing.
want us to split everything 50-50. That's what's happening.
Yeah,
Um, and even like my parents' siblings, I was like, surely you want to take some of their stuff as like mementos. And they're like, nah, we're old. We have too much stuff.
Yeah.
So, so we were like, okay, got to figure out how to get rid of all this stuff.
Mhm.
But I mean, my sister and I think, handle these situations very differently.
Mhm.
I probably, because I am the oldest, I do have a very like, gotta take charge, gotta like handle the situation,
Yeah.
very active form of grief. And my sister, I think, much more openly shows her emotions than I do. And sometimes,
Yeah.
so I think maybe not even because of the ages. I'm not saying my sister would necessarily be a bad executor or anything, but I
Right.
think it makes sense. This arrangement makes sense. I think it would be a lot more difficult for her just
Yeah.
because of her personality to kind of handle a lot of this stuff.
Yeah.
So sometimes it's been, I guess, like if there's any tension, it has been frustration with me being like, we need to handle this, and her being like, just crying, and I'm like, but you can cry, but we gotta handle it, you know. um and yeah, so sometimes that has been a little frustrating, but overall, obviously, I think it's wonderful that my sister is there. She helped with a lot of the funeral planning because I, as the executor, you know, there's some stuff she simply cannot do because of
Yeah.
legal reasons. Like I have to do it. So
Yeah.
I was like, you know what though? You can call these vendors and you can like figure this stuff out.
Yeah.
So she helped with that a lot. And I also should say, I have to shout out some of my best friends in the world, Meg and Lita and Felipe. The second my dad went into hospice, Lita flew in from Colorado and Meg came in from the city, and they just took care of us for several weeks. They like cooked us food. They made us care packages to bring to the hospital with us, you know, of like cozy socks and dry shampoo and all of the stuff that you
Yeah.
would need when you're like spending way too much time in a hospital room.
Yeah.
Um, and we played like a TTRPG, like a Dungeons and Dragons style game at home. We played Twister. They would just like find ways to
Keep you
bring joy
occupied.
into the
Yeah.
situation and make
Yeah.
it less stressful. And they were able to, for example, after my dad died, they were like, we'll handle telling all of our/your friends so that you don't have to do that and you can just handle this other stuff. So,
Yeah.
yeah, like
What
I
a
said, I have
gift.
an
What
aggressive,
amazing
yeah,
friends. That's
they're wonderful.
that's
I do
so
not
awesome.
know how people survive without friends like that.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
amazing. All right, I have three questions that I close with on every episode.
Okay.
What
Yes.
has been the single most impactful or transformative experience you've had since you've started working with all of this?
Oh my goodness. One time I hold a series of death salons at the library here in Louisville,
Mhm.
and one woman who came, I had made a passing comment at the first one about hospice medications and about how, you know, like I think a lot of people get scared that giving morphine to people might like kill their loved one or something like that. And that's
Yeah.
absolutely not true. So I had made like a passing comment about hospice medications, and at a later meeting she said, you made me realize that I didn't kill my mom. I'd been like carrying this guilt for such a long time,
Oh my
and you
God.
made me realize that that wasn't my fault. And I was like, oh, it was like I wanted to cry right then and there. I was like, I'm so glad that I could help you with that, but
That's
I'm so
amazing.
sorry you ever had to feel that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. What has this work that you're doing and the loss of your parents so young, what has that taught you about living?
Oh, it has definitely, like, there's no way I would have quit my job. I think it's weird because in order to write this book and do this stuff, of course, my parents had to die, or else there would be no reason that I was doing it.
Yeah.
But also, it made me way less afraid to quit my job and just lean into it, because if I live as long as hopefully I'll live longer than my parents did, but if I live as long as they did, I get what, like 30 years, maybe less. So I might as well be doing exactly what I want when I want to do it, if
Yeah.
in as so much as I can, you know. So
Yeah.
yeah, it has made me a lot less afraid to jump on stuff.
Yeah.
Just go out and do it. Yeah.
That's awesome. And last question, are you afraid to die? Why or why not?
I am afraid to die because I am the type of person who overthinks things, and I don't know. I actually also really like mystery, so I think there's something beautiful in the fact that we do not know what happens when we die. But
Yeah.
I think I actually don't think I'm afraid to die. I think I'm afraid of the process of dying. I think I'm afraid of
Yeah.
being in pain or it being in a way that I don't want.
Yeah.
But I don't think I can possibly be afraid of death itself, because I won't notice. I'll be dead.
Yeah.
But yeah, and there's part of me that would like to live forever, not because I'm arrogant, but partially just because I really like history and I would like to see how society changes. I could be like a historian throughout the years,
Yeah.
documenting everything. But I also realize I would probably get very bored and tired. So yeah.
Quick question. Tell me about your death salons. What do you do there?
Oh, okay. So, I mean, people hold death salons and death cafes in different ways. I
Right.
decided to do it at the library, A, because I have great connections there, and the Louisville Free Public Library has always treated me really well and kindly, and has been very supportive of my work. But also, it's a cute name because I call it Due Date, a library death salon, because it's like when your book is due. But, but so, some people, when they hold death cafes or death salons, they have it very open. It's like we're just discussing anything about death and dying, whatever comes up.
Hmm.
In my experience, in the ones that I've held there, the people who come seem to at least like to have a theme. So usually I come with some sort of topic prepared and I announce it beforehand. Like, for example, in October, we actually talked about the dead hand. We talked about estate law because I was like, what's scarier than that? So the idea was bring your fears about that and we will talk them through, and either through what I've learned or through our collective experience, we can hopefully help allay some of those fears. Because everybody, I always try to remind people that as a salon, the idea is it's not me teaching you a class, it's us coming together with our different experiences with death and dying, because they all have different experiences than I have had,
Hmm.
and we are all different ages and we all come from different backgrounds.
Yeah.
So let's come together and talk about these issues and see how we can help each other and teach each other in these
Yeah.
moments. So it's usually a group discussion, but there is usually a theme. And I try to bring some sort of background on that issue when I come, just like a few, I don't want to talk the whole time, but just like a few points
Yeah.
of history about that, or background information about that, or what specific laws are in Kentucky, that sort of thing.
Right. Okay. That's
Yeah.
awesome. All right. Well, Becky, I cannot thank you enough for being on the show. I'm really sorry for your losses, but I am
Thank
thankful that
you.
you were able to kind of turn it into something that serves a greater good for so many people. Listeners, I will drop all of Becky's social handles. I'm assuming the book is available for pre-order, so I'll drop a link in
Yes.
there for that as well. And just thank you so much. It has been my pleasure.
Thank you for having me. This was great.
Awesome. All right. I'll talk
All
to you.
right.
Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye.
If you like this episode of Dying to Know More, be sure to give it a like and don't forget to subscribe so you never miss another episode.